Well, listen, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I really appreciate it. Guys.
Anyway, it's a great honor to be.
Thank you, sir.
With you. Thank you.
Good luck to you.
And yeah, I just appreciate you giving me your time today, Donald Trump. Thank you so much.
And good luck with your situation. This is going to be the most important election in the history of our country, I believe.
I believe that too, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. It's
I'm
a great
behind you.
honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
The cliches don't do it justice. Hook, line, and sinker. Those bros were in. Trump had them. Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. Life comes at you fast, especially when you help make Donald Trump president. Because ever since, really, those interviews and ever since his reelection, every single one of those podcast bros you just heard from, really important voices, whatever you think of them personally or morally or ethically, they are really important. They speak to a lot of men, a lot of young men, a lot of our kids, and maybe your grandkids. Every one of those men speak to a not insignificant number of Americans. Every one of them now has turned on Trump. And I don't know their motives. We can talk about that at length. But every single one of them has expressed a personal sense of betrayal and disapproval, particularly when it comes to the war with Iran. But for some of them, it happened before that with the Epstein files. And on that story, Semafor reports this, quote, of the 14 long-form bro podcasts Trump appeared on during his 2024 presidential campaign, 8 of the hosts have questioned or criticized the war, while just 2 have endorsed it. We showed you the end of Theo Von's interview with Donald Trump during the campaign, one seen by more viewers than Pennsylvania has people. Well, here's Theo Von this week talking about Donald Trump's threat to wipe out Iran's entire civilization.
I mean, that's just, on Easter, that's unbelievable. You know, when people are hoping for something new, literally on the day when people are hoping and are believing with their hearts as much as they can and are celebrating something new, a rebirth, a resurrection, a possibility. To write that it's diabolical. It's insane.
We've been tracking commentary like that, not just from him, that was Theo Von, but from his podcast, Bros in Arms, if you will, Joe Rogan, who also matters a lot in how young men vote and whether or not they vote, who also endorsed Donald Trump. He has famously been mad at him lately. That's why they're getting back together, a reunion, if this interaction at a recent UFC event has been so closely scrutinized, and why it was disorienting to some to see Joe Rogan right back at the White House days later when Trump signed an executive order to speed up a federal review of psychedelic drugs intended to treat mental illness. Joe Rogan described what led up to that event, and in doing so, might have revealed just how desperately Donald Trump needs Joe Rogan back on his political side.
And I said how effective it is, and I said, you know, and it's been held up for so long. And he said, what are you looking for? Are you looking for FDA approval? He goes, it sounds good to me. He said, let's do it. And so literally he sees me at the UFC the next day, shakes my hand and says, it's done.
Wow.
That's what he was saying.
That's so funny.
I was like, and I said, thank you, sir. It wasn't like he was mad at me at all.
People jump on these like conclusions like...
Well, that's okay. You know, you're allowed to. But this is the truth. That's exactly what happened. He came to me and he said, it's done.
Wherein the president bypasses an entire agency designed to make sure drugs are safe to make Joe Rogan happy. That's where we are in this story. Remember what Semafor reported and called long-form bro podcasts are really sort of a subgenre of a larger conservative media ecosystem that we've paid attention to for a long time. But those personalities aren't alone in their critiques. Here's former Fox News anchor Megyn Kelly yesterday.
I think many of us just like Trump. You know, we like his personality. Yeah. But then the other truth of it is there are aspects of his personality which are obviously not good and that we've mostly just chosen to overlook. You know, he's not a moral man. He's obviously not the greatest husband in the world. And he's extremely petty and thin-skinned, extremely petty and thin-skinned. And what we're seeing right now is he's turning on his most loyal supporters because they don't support this war and getting in bed with people who hate him. and have hated him from the beginning.
I have to say F-bomb Megyn is my favorite Megyn, but Megyn likes the personality of someone who said, quote, there was blood coming out of her everywhere. And again, not qualified to assess how you would like a person's personality who said that about you, but there's that. Now, to be clear, it would be insane and foolish and stupid and a betrayal of your trust in us to suggest that any of these figures are allies of ours in protecting American democracy. They are not. Nor are they truth tellers. Not even now. But they knew Trump was all of the things they are saying now to their followers for years. Tucker Carlson called him a, quote, demonic force. We cover them here on this show because they are political bellwethers, more than most. And they are attacking Donald Trump right now because they can. These are not people who do the right thing even when it's hard. These are people who do and say the thing that sells their stuff to the most people. And lo and behold, ding, 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 that, ladies and gentlemen, is the beginning of the end for the brand that is Donald Trump. Trump is now the dog food that the dog won't eat. And not even Megyn Kelly and her F-bombs or Joe Rogan and his newly approved psychedelic drugs can force it down Fido's throat. Hashtag sad. That's where we start the hour. Charlie Sykes is here. He's the author of the newsletter To the Contrary. And with me for the hour, senior political analyst, contributing host on Pod Save America, host of the podcast Runaway Country, Alex Wagner is here. Alex, I start with you. Your thoughts on this surreal moment from, I feel like we're at the bottom of the looking glass, looking up. I want some of Joe Rogan's psychedelic drugs, I think.
Yeah, there's not enough psilocybin in the world to fast track to get them, some of these guys back on Trump's side. I'll just say, side note, hashtag Nicole is my favorite Nicole. That was a barn burner, sis. But I got to say, look, you know, it is, what is the phrase that comes to mind? Rats off a sinking ship. That's what's happening. And it's, you know, these are people, we think of bro podcasters, I guess, as not leaders, but just in the middle of a zeitgeist. They are expressions of Trump's cratering support among young people, among white people, among Latinos, among black men. I mean, he's got a 30% approval rating among young white men. He has lost 16% of his approval from Latinos just in the last year. This is someone who is hemorrhaging support, who is bleeding out among the coalition that brought him back into the White House, purely based on mistakes of his own making. And mistakes is being too euphemistic about it. Just catastrophic failures, disavowals of the very principles upon which he rode back into office. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's good that you have people like Tucker and Theo and Megyn saying the things that they say. But I just, part of me, the like very small, ethically alarmed part of me that still exists in these Trump years, also understands that this is convenient for all of these people, right? Like Tucker Carlson, is he running for office? Is this a way for him to curry favor with people who might want to, you know, who will ultimately see the tatters in which Donald Trump leaves the country but want to stay in the MAGA universe? Megyn Kelly, I mean, nobody knows more about being thin-skinned and opportunistic than Megyn Kelly. I don't think Democrats can take a lot of this podcast criticism to the bank. I still think that there's work to do to get some of these folks who listen to these programs on the Democratic side of the aisle. But I do think the skepticism and the criticism is expressive of a larger and significant issue that Trump is having with the electorate writ large.
I think, Charlie, too, it's the contrast between where we were a year ago, where Trump played such a dominant figure in our politics, the culture felt irretrievable. Trump has now lost his slice of the culture.
Yeah, I think there's no question about that. Look, I can't get over Megyn Kelly saying that she really likes Donald Trump's personality. I think we have to think about this. Look, you know, it is true that rodents traditionally do not want to go down with a sinking ship, and I think you put your finger on it. You know, you described the people who listen to the podcasters as the followers, but remember that story of the French Revolution where maybe it's an apocryphal story where the leader says, "There goes my people. I need to catch up with them because I am their leader." You know, a lot of these podcasters have a sense of what's happening with their audience, and they are sensing the fact that people are breaking with Trump. They're disillusioned with Trump. They're rolling their eyes at Trump. And so they're following where their audience is going, because it's true that he's got a podcast problem, but he's got a young voter problem, a woman problem. He's losing support among Latinos, non-white voters, white working class voters, white voters without college educations. And the podcasters, look, we're not dealing with really like deep thinkers here. Right. I mean, the fact that they were all suckered by Donald Trump back in 2024 is probably a little bit of a tell. They're kind of cheap dates, but they do know where their audience is headed, and none of them want to be left behind. So I do think that what you are seeing is that they are in many ways kind of a symptom of this cultural collapse of Trumpism that's happening rather rapidly and in real time.